Hey, we all know that there's a big Cat 4 hurricane swooping down on the Carolinas, and then it's going to turn north and going to hit the mid-Atlantic, Virginia, D.C., and who knows what it's going to do to New England. By the time it gets up there, they call it a nor'easter. But this video is to talk about why the time frame, what your mindset, your preparedness mindset needs to be when faced with a hurricane specifically, or any event where evacuation is a high probability, or where your mobility is going to require you to bug in, because if you're evacuating, you're bugging out, right? So let's take a look at a typical hurricane. Now, I've lived through 5 hurricanes, 3 tornadoes, 3 earthquakes, and 3 riots, you know, so I got a lot of experience in some of these things. But specifically, what I like about hurricanes is that you can see them coming. You can see them coming. You can see them coming a week ahead of time. And the west coast of Africa is like a hurricane shotgun. It just sits there and pumps those storms right out of the west coast. And some of them we get, some of them we don't. But you can see them coming. And you can pretty much tell how long you're going to be in the shit. So let's talk about that, right? So everybody, a hurricane's round, right? You have, and it kind of moves fairly slowly, sometimes 25 knots, 25 miles an hour over the ground, sometimes a little faster, but about that. And they tend to be, you know, maybe 500 miles in diameter, or a 250-mile radius. We'll talk about why that's from the eye, why that's important. But the main thing to consider is that it's rotating counterclockwise, and by the time it hits the shore, and that's it, so if you live on the shoreline where one of these things is going to hit, your mindset needs to be, it's going to take 3 days from the time the leading edge of that circle hits you and the trailing edge has gone by. So you're in the shit for 3 days. That's important. Nobody is going to come get you in those 3 days. Why? Because everybody is hunkered down. No police, no first responders, nobody. Because if it's dangerous for you, it's dangerous for them. So that's why FEMA talks about 72 hours. You are going to be 72 hours on your own, right? Now, if you're bugging in, which is kind of stupid if there's an evacuation order, it's 72 hours. Now, some storms are not going to be Category 4. Some storms are just going to be a tropical storm. It's just going to be lots of wind, 50 knots, and lots of rain. So as long as you're not in a flood zone, you can safely bug in. But you're going to have 3 days by yourself, and then there's power outages and other things. So 3 days. Then the first responders start to show up. And they're not going to hit your place first. Don't assume that. Guess what? It's going to take another 3 days before all of the resources get staged and deployed for your area. So that's 6 calendar days. Call it a week. Call it a week. So that's why most mindsets for prep is not 72 hours. That's the absolute minimum. You really should be thinking about 1 week's worth of being able to be on your own wherever you are. Now, if you're in a shelter, it's 1 week. If you bugged out to a hotel, it's 1 week. You see what I'm saying? So think 1 week, not 72 hours. Now, on the front end of that, before the leading edge hits where you are, first responders, FEMA, National Guard, those people, they're staging their resources because they pretty much know what to expect here. And they're putting their stuff out. Now, when an evacuation order hits, or they start to say the E word, that's usually 2 days ahead of the first, the leading edge. You understand what I'm saying? So that's 2 days that you need to be thinking about, do I have enough gas in my car? Where am I going to go? That's a minimum. Me, that's 3 days before the leading edge hits where I'm going to be. That's 3 plus 3 plus 3. 9 days. Call it 2 weeks. You understand what I'm saying? That's why a lot of preppers think like me. I think in 2-week blocks of time. Now let's talk about bugging out or evacuating. Or even if there's not a mandatory evacuation, sometimes it just makes good sense to be someplace else to avoid certain damage, to whatever. When you do that, how much gas should you have? Well, remember, 500 miles, so there's a diameter of 250 miles, right? From the center of the storm to the leading edge. So you have to be able to, in one fuel load, drive 250 miles. So think about where you are, where you live, and ask yourself, what's 300 miles from me, and can I make it 300 miles? Now in my vehicle, I can barely make 300 miles. So I need to have a couple cans of fuel to make sure that I can get outside that 250 mile danger zone. Okay. So just apply this model to where you live. Apply this model to, especially if you're on the coastline and anywhere in the Gulf or the East Coast. If you don't already think this way, you probably should. Now, let's talk about getting home. Everybody talks about, I got my get home bag. No, you ain't getting home. You're not getting home. If you're someplace else and your family's in the danger zone, you're not going to get them. I don't care what they do in the movies. You're not going to get them. If you think you're going to make it through the destruction, through the disaster, get to your family or whoever, and then make it back out, you are smoking funny stuff. That's not going to happen. All of y'all probably die. So you need to have a family plan that says, if the shit happens and we are separated, we are on our own until the situation allows us to get back together. So have a communication plan so you can let each other know, assuming the cell grids are working, or if you're a ham operator, you can get to a ham amateur radio setup and talk to somebody and have information transferred. Do that. But don't think that you're at work and your kids are at school and your wife is, and y'all are somehow going to go through that stuff and get back together again. It's not going to happen. Not unless you all have a death wish. So, summarize. Minimum 9 days, probably 2 weeks of preps that you need to have, whether you're going to bug in, assuming that it's safe enough to bug in, or if you have to evacuate. 2 weeks worth of stuff that you have. 2, you're not going to get home. You're not going to go back through that stuff, try to find somebody, and then take them back out. That's not going to happen. So as a family, have a plan so that you're self-sufficient where you are, because you're going to have to stay where you are. So I thought I'd put that out there since this thing is going on, and to give you some framework of a more rational time frame on how to think about your preps. Okay, as always, thanks for watching. Carry on.